Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my honor and privilege to welcome you to the CESA Infrastructure Indaba 2021. My name is Chris Campbell, for those whom I have not had the privilege of meeting before. And it indeed is my pleasure to be facilitating the conference program for today and tomorrow. We would like to both heartily welcome you and thank you for joining us today. We know how valuable time is in today's new world of remote working, and we indeed appreciate your attendance in this virtual realm for what promises to be an incredible program of discussion, thought leadership, and knowledge sharing. Indeed, a welcome break from the Zoom fatigue that you're probably all going through to be doing it on this platform. And just to give you some insight, this CESA Indaba brings together leading technical engineering experts sourced locally and internationally, people from government entities, contractors, suppliers, and other professionals involved in the engineering and built environment, even from as far abroad as the US. The purpose of our Indaba is to share ideas on optimizing efficiencies in infrastructure investment and implementation, simultaneously ensuring that such investments are indeed sustainable. It is imperative that the needs of the people are served while supporting economic growth, which is key to the eradication of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, all three of which feature very highly in terms of South Africa's prominence, certainly not a position where we could claim to have positive bragging rights. So lest we further be seen to be in that position, we got to start doing something and doing it urgently. So this 2021 CESA Infrastructure Indaba theme is engineering the future now. And the deliberations will follow under the various sub-themes. But before we move on and proceed with our program, I'm going to do what most of us, we often have to do, is they call it paying the rent. So I'm going to acknowledge our sponsors, acknowledge first of all you, our delegates, and then our sponsors. As a start, just before we segue into the first panel, and we have the CIDB, Construction Industry Development Board, as our silver sponsor. CIDB, as many of us may be aware, was established in terms of the Construction Industry Development Board Act 38 of 2000 to provide strategic leadership to construction stakeholders to stimulate sustainable growth, reform, and improve the construction industry. Proceed with Old Mutual, who is financial planning, and they manage financial portfolios. They provide a broad range of customers with the advice and solutions they need to strengthen their financial well-being. And then our next silver sponsor is Zutari. Zutari is indeed one of our member company of CESA, and Zutari seeks to co-create an engineered impact that enables environments, communities, and economies to thrive. Few can match their local capacity, long-standing presence, and understanding of the challenges required to operate successfully across various regions, namely Africa and the Middle East. Their ongoing commitment to co-create and impact makes them the perfect partner to those less familiar with working in these regions. And then I'm going to move over to our affiliate partners. First one being Aon South Africa. Aon is a leading provider of insurance and reinsurance broking, risk consulting, and employee benefits. Many of our members are familiar with Aon, and for those of us who are not too familiar, it would be worth contacting them. They are experts in professional indemnity, business insurance broking, employee benefits, as well as your short-term insurance such as household and motor insurance broking. Our next affiliate partner is a company known as Isowall Group. Possibly not familiar enough to many of us. Isowall aims to foster a healthy and safe working environment in which all of the employees work as a motivated team. Directed through strategic leadership and efficient management to provide quality goods and services that are customer-centric, reliable, and environmentally sustainable. The overall focus of the Isowall Group is twofold. One being manufacturing and installation of Isowall sandwich panels, and the other is the manufacturing of Isolite, expanded polystyrene, and expanded polypropylene products. The group caters mainly for insulation, construction, packaging, agricultural, and automotive markets. And then next on our list of affiliates is the company Silversoft, whom many of you are most likely aware of. And for those who are not, Silversoft is an exclusive provider of Deltic enterprise software solutions for people, projects, and knowledge-intensive organizations. They are headquartered in Johannesburg, and the company primarily services South African and African customers and key international clients. Silversoft's chief industry solution offerings are Deltic Vision, Maconomy, People Planner, and Deltic Talent-Tailored Enterprise Resource Planning and Talent Management Solutions that deliver real-time information, enabling its clients to better manage their projects, improve the productivity of their resources, increase revenues, manage costs, and drive profitable behavior. And then last but not least, in fact, amongst our affiliates, this is not really an affiliate, one of the sponsors is the CESA School of Consulting Engineering. And I'd just like to make you aware of the school is offering 2 prize giveaways, and that would be over the next 2 days, would be a course on each day to anyone who may be fortunate enough to win such a prize, at which we will have a virtual lucky draw. So for those of us not familiar with the school, it was founded as far back as in 2000, and it aims to provide the opportunity for people employed in consulting engineering firms or any other professional service provider companies, and all of their staff, their clients, other interested parties, an opportunity to enhance their business, professional, communication, and entrepreneurial skills. All our training is interactive and participative, and our methodologies are designed to achieve maximum group participation and allow delegates to take away real practical skills from practitioners in the field rather than just simply imparting theoretical knowledge. And then, colleagues, and I do thank you for indulging me, I have to acknowledge also our media partners. First one being 3S Media, and they've become one of the largest specialist B2B media houses in Southern Africa, offering print, online, and media content solutions for and to business communities for over 60 years. And then last but not least is Concrete Trends, also a business-to-business multimedia platform comprising a print and digital trade magazine that has been servicing the concrete industry for over 23 years. So, having acknowledged all of our sponsors, allow me to go back to some of the important housekeeping for today and over the next 2 days. As you would have realized that we are using a very different platform to Zoom. For those of you not familiar with it, it is known as Remo. It has quite a few different features, and we hope that you make use of all of these features. We also recommend that you use your laptop and not a tablet, so that you can really make sure of being able to use the interactive options like comment section and the Q&A feature. So first out, if you've connected using your phone or tablet, there is still time to log in with your computer. The full sessions are being recorded, and we can share a full recording after the event. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a small green button. If you click on this, you'll see the chat facility. And we'd love to see you really engaging with us as the launch unfolds. So do keep the momentum going by commenting and asking questions. We will also continue with some networking at the end of the launch. So please do stay for some virtual face-to-face chatting with the CESA team, our speakers, our valued partners and exhibitors. And with the housekeeping now out of the way, I'd like to take you through the day's agenda. So, but before I do that, I'm going to do a but wait, because I have to do this pitch and use the opportunity while I have your full attention and your bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So I would like to emphasize that you use the breaks, certainly to meet with representatives. And in addition, I would like to take the opportunity to remind you of two of our upcoming events. And of course, as you are well aware, lockdown has meant that many of us could not practice our chipping and putting, and extra restrictions meant we could not even enjoy the 19th hole. But luckily, things are different this year. We are delighted to announce our Presidential Golf Challenge, due to take place on the 13th of October at Rand Park Golf Club. Please visit our website, www.cesa.co.za, for more information. And then, last but not least, our flagship event on our annual calendar, as you are well aware, is our CESA Aeon Awards. We are planning to host this virtually on the 10th of November, starting at about 4 in the afternoon. And if you are interested, please email events@cesa.co.za for more information. So let me dive into our program directly after that, dear audience and speakers. Our official welcome addresses and opening messages will be delivered by our esteemed President, Mr. Sugen Pillay, from the company Zitolele Consulting. This will then be followed by a keynote addresses by guest speakers, Executive Mayor, Mr. Bongani Baloy from the Midvaal Local Municipality, and Mr. Cass Kuvadia, the CEO of Business Unity South Africa. After the break, we'll head into our second panel discussion with the topic of infrastructure investment and development. And just so that you can plan your day, when we return from lunch, our panel session then will cover the topic of public sector procurement in the construction sector. So please, I invite you not to go too far away during the breaks so that you don't miss any of these really valuable sessions. Without further ado, I would like to now call on the facilitator, who is going to be none other than Mr. Andre van der Walt. Andre is the General Manager at, for Energy and Resources at SMEC, Africa Division, and he is our facilitator for Session 1. He's a registered international professional engineer with 29 years experience in the engineering industry, and in his role at SMEC, his function on the African continent is focusing primarily on transmission and renewable projects. At this point, I'd like to welcome Andre, and please, Andre, if you could proceed with taking us through the first section as a facilitator.
Thank you, Chris. It is indeed an honor for me to facilitate the opening session of this year's CESA conference, and we look forward to a fantastic lineup of speakers this year. Needs little introduction. Sugeng Pillay is currently the president of CESA and the managing director of Zitolele Consulting, a consulting practice that specializes in the field of water and wastewater management, as well as ash waste management at power stations. The forerunner of Zitolele Consulting, R&R Consulting, was started with his current partner back in 2006. Pillay graduated from the former University of Natal with a BSc Honours in Civil Engineering through a bursary scheme offered by a consulting engineering practice. He has since completed a postgraduate diploma in Civil Engineering and an MBA cum laude. He is a registered professional engineer and a member of CESA with over 20 years of experience in the design and implementation of projects that cover most facets of civil engineering. He's more recently started focusing on project and program management related to multidisciplinary mega projects and infrastructure programs. Pillay has previously served as chairman of Gauteng South branch for CESA, as chairman of the Gauteng branch for the SA Roads Federation, as well as chair of the Finance, Education and Training Committees of CESA. Welcome, Sugeng, and the floor is yours.
Thank you to our program director and our session facilitator, to one and all, to our virtual CESA infrastructure Indaba. So to the executive mayor of the Midvaal local municipality, Mr. Bongani Boloy, the CEO of BUSA, Mr. Kes Kovadia, other dignitaries that may have joined us on this virtual platform, members of the CESA board, members of CESA, members of the media, esteemed delegates, colleagues, and friends. It indeed gives me great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of CESA to our annual CESA Infrastructure Indaba, which for the first time is being held in a virtual format. So we are indeed looking forward to the deliberations over the next 2 days. CESA's presidential theme for 2021 has been titled Rebuilding with Purpose. And through my various interactions over the year, I have been at pains to convey our message around how we embrace the massive rebuilding exercise that we have embarked on with a different purpose and with a different mindset. We will no doubt unpack a few of the key issues that have been highlighted in this theme during the past year over the next 2 days at this Indaba. Firstly, it is important that as a country that we have broadly reached consensus around the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. This plan, as we all know, places great emphasis on investment in infrastructure development as the bedrock that will support our economic recovery. This has created some much needed optimism for our industry as well as the country, which has been suffering from decreased spending and dwindling investment. So with this plan in mind, the important role of the consulting engineer has become ever more clear. And that is why we have chosen as our theme for the year, and indeed for the conference, Rebuilding with Purpose and Engineering the Future. However, you will note that from the broad range of speakers and panelists that have been invited to this Indaba, whilst the role of engineers is going to be critical in the recovery process, it is equally important that all of the role players and stakeholders that are involved in the infrastructure delivery value chain do contribute to this massive rebuilding exercise. So I want to once again extend our appreciation to all of our speakers and panelists for sharing their time with us, and no doubt their thoughts and inputs are going to be valuable over the next 2 days and are going to be important in formalizing the resolutions of this conference. My next point has been made many times previously, but it is most certainly worth repeating. Democracies are precious and fragile, and they do need to be nurtured. Democracy will become less and less meaningful. And indeed, I think it is already becoming less and less meaningful to those in our society that are stuck in poverty with no access to basic services and with limited or no opportunities. Hence, my theme has been fashioned around rebuilding with purpose. As we embark on this massive rebuilding project, let us try to rebuild in a conscious and mindful manner. How do we reimagine infrastructure delivery so that rebuilding doesn't just become about providing infrastructure, but that it is consciously engineered to address poverty, inequality, underdevelopment, and unemployment? We, as consulting engineers, and indeed all of the role players, we are placed in a unique position where we have the power to positively influence those outcomes and to contribute to achieving the objectives of the recovery plan. Also, as we embark on this rebuilding exercise, it is critical that active and conscious community engagement is part of this entire process. We certainly want to encourage greater community involvement in the infrastructure that we build and maintain, both in terms of communities as end users, but very importantly, as well as creating employment opportunities for those communities during the delivery of the infrastructure or maintenance processes. And to me, this means fully embracing the concept of saving lives and livelihoods into everything that we do. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, as a country, we must also be mindful of the global development goals and the commitments equality and underdevelopment, and they, of course, are already built into these goals. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have some very interesting discussions lined up over the next 2 days, including various topics around infrastructure and investment, public sector procurement, and then tomorrow around transformation and development, a hot topic recently around professionalization in the state and the private sector, And then finally, a session that I'm indeed looking forward to, the impact of the infrastructure projects that we are going to implement, and specifically their impact around poverty reduction, employment creation, and closing the inequality gap. We are looking forward to those deep conversations and those deep discussions. So I invite you to relax and to enjoy the next 2 days of our infrastructure in Indaba. Thank you.
Thank you, Sigyn. Just a reminder to all, you are welcome to post any questions on the Q&A. We can get to that at the end of our session. So our first keynote address is from a speaker that's a real trailblazer. Cas Cavadia obtained his BCom degree from the University College in Durban in 1971. He later completed the Housing Finance course with the Wharton Real Estate Center at University of Pennsylvania, and also completed the Effective Directors Program with the Kagiso School of Leadership. Cavadia is the newly appointed CEO of Business Unity South Africa, BUSA, and former Managing Director of BASA, the Banking Association of South Africa. He has played a central role in the negotiations leading to the signing of the Financial Sector Charter, and is playing a critical role in the implementation of the agreements reached in the Charter. Cavadia is the immediate past chairman of the Johannesburg Civic Theatre and vice chairperson of the Trust for Urban Housing Finance. He's also the chairperson of the National Business Initiative and treasurer of the African Union for Housing Finance. He serves on the board of the Centre for Development and Enterprise, and he's also first deputy president of the International Union for Housing Finance, where he served as president for 5 years. He serves as council members of the University of Witwatersrand, and is on the board of NEPAD Business Foundation and board of BUSA. He's also the chairman of the Johannesburg Development Agency, a corporatized entity of the city of Johannesburg. On the board of the International Banking Federation, Cavadia presents BASA, the only African association of banks that's a member of the International Union of Housing Finance. Cas, we look forward to your address. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. CESA is a member of BUSA. Chris is on the BUSA board, and so we consider the consulting engineers sector in South Africa to be a pretty important one. And I know that, like a lot of sectors, you've had your challenges in the last few years. And what we trying to do as BUSA is to address some of those broader environmental issues that lead to challenges that organizations like CESA and others have. So what I'm going to do is just brief your Indaba on what keeps BUSA awake at night, what we're dealing with, how we're dealing with those issues, so that you have some sense of what we do, how we're doing it, and what we're trying to do to address issues that would be important to CESA as well, because they make it difficult for CESA to actually do their work. There are a couple of issues I'd like to touch on. One is economic recovery, and I'll just talk to what we're doing, processes we're involved in, and either progress or lack of thereof. I'll also talk about a number of issues that BUSA is dealing with that are quite high up on the agenda at the moment. One is the whole issue about localization and jacking up local manufacturing of goods. Second is re-looking at the Companies Act. Government wants, and labor is engaging us on labor representation on the boards of companies, and I'll just talk a little bit to that. The third is the national health insurance, which is, while it's to do with health, the impact of this could be across the economy and how we're dealing with that. Then there's climate change and energy, and I'll say a few words about that. I'll say a few words about the vaccine rollout and then just something about infrastructure. So I'll give a broad overview of all of these so that we don't run out of time. On economic recovery, during the course of last year, as we were working with government and other stakeholders to manage the impact of COVID, we put together a comprehensive post-COVID economic recovery strategy that's available on the website. Chris knows about it, and Chris can make it available to his members. And it talked about a repositioning of the economy, not just a rebuilding. And we are quite clear that we need to reposition the economy so that it is inclusive and the majority of our people in this country have a stake in the economy. We presented this to the president and his team sometime in June or July last year. President decided that he wants to have the economic recovery discussions via NEDLAC. And since then, we've been involved in discussions at NEDLAC, but we haven't as of yet had an invitation from government to meet us bilaterally on our economic recovery strategy, which we think is a problem and which we are pushing for. We developed at NEDLAC an economic recovery action plan, which all NEDLAC constituencies agreed are immediately actionable items that government could move on. And some of those were the auction of the spectrum, sorting out mining exploration licensing, issuing the next RFP for the renewables, sorting out the Durban port. This was in September last year. And some of those we've had movement on early this year, 6 or 7 months later. But one of the problems that we continue to raise at NEDLAC, and we meet at a high level with ministers and with leaders of labor and community groups, is the lack of urgency, that government is not taking the hard decisions to create an environment for investment and growth. We're not being unequivocal about our economic model, and that we want investors, and there's no buts behind that sentence. So there's been a leadership issue, there's been a state capacity issue, and as a result of that, the discussions at NEDLAC have quite honestly produced very little. But we continue to do that, and we continue to also engage the president bilaterally to see if we can unblock that. The July upheavals simply exacerbated what was already a bad situation. And on the July upheavals, we agreed with the president that this was an attempt at insurrection. And in discussion with the president, we indicated to him that if we agree on that, then this will be attempted again. And again on this, there's been very little movement. The government had said that they've got 14 odd suspects, nobody's been arrested. Government had said that we fell short on our security and intelligence issues. Very little has been done to remedy that. And so the general problem we have on the whole economic recovery process and other issues that impact on this is lack of urgency, lack of hard decision making, and lack of leadership. It's essentially that's the issue from government. And while the private sector and BUSA, we will continue to push and we will continue to meet until we crack through that. I don't think we're going to make too much progress. I don't think we're going to make too much progress. Then on localization, the Trade and Industry and Competition Minister has been quite forceful on promoting localization. We had some work done between BLSA and BUSA by Intellidex that showed that localization in some areas of the economy, in some specific product areas, we definitely have possibilities of increasing manufacturing there. But so we've put together about 30 CEOs that champion for localization. And we're working on which product categories are low-hanging fruits, how we can actually bring those up to scale, and then how we can start working on others. But it's something that we are working on. We believe there's some low-hanging fruits there, and provided, again, the appropriate regulatory environment is in place, we can actually begin to jack up manufacturing, local manufacturing, and create jobs. I think an example of this was during COVID last year. In the early part of COVID, we imported all of our PPE because we needed it urgently. We then worked with GTIC on trying to develop local manufacturing capacity. And today we have about 20 small to medium-sized firms that manufacture probably 90% of the PPE we need in the country. And so there are good sort of experiences and lessons learned from this, and we'll apply this. On labor representation on company boards, our view with government is that we don't believe this is the time when we have significant problems to deal with in the country, economic and social problems. We don't believe this is the time to tinker around with board governance. There are a whole range of issues related to confidentiality, fiduciary responsibilities to the board and the company you serve. Board directors do not usually represent a constituency. They are there with a fiduciary responsibility toward the company. And we need to work through all of those issues so that those discussions are still on in the channels. On national health insurance, again, we've taken the view that equitable healthcare for everybody is a priority. But that the way to do this is to utilize both the public and private sector. You don't destroy a private sector that's working, although may not be giving access to a significant number of people in the country, to try and bring about equity across the board. And so we've made detailed submissions to Parliament with detail on what parts of their bill needs to be amended to enable a public-private sector interaction to utilize the best capacity available across the public and private sector in health to provide equitable healthcare and give people choices. And we continue to engage on that. On climate change, we've made significant commitments to moving away from fossil fuel to more greener forms of energy. The ESCOM CEO has been quite vocal that we cannot continue the way we are, that we need to invest more in renewables, and that's a breath of fresh air. And we are working towards the next COP meeting in Glasgow later this year, where to us, while we have made commitments to move from fossil fuels to green and cleaner energy over a period of time, what is critical for us is that we need to have a just transition pathway in place so that those that are dependent on fossil fuel, and there are a significant number of people, both employees and communities that depend on them, that are dependent on fossil fuel, that we phase into a greener form of energy and a cleaner form of energy and minimize the impact that would have on employment and on communities. And we are also very clear that we want the developed countries that committed to assist with funding and capacity to enable developing countries to actually, both in the mitigation efforts and in transitioning to a new form of energy, those funds need to flow, and we would certainly want to apply for some of those funds to help us move into a new climate trajectory. On the vaccine rollout, we've we mobilized about 40 odd professionals, experts, to assist government on a pro bono basis to roll out the vaccines. It's been tough. We had a supply problem. We've sorted that supply problem out. We now have a demand problem. I think people are weary. They don't want to, they're not coming for the vaccines. And we're working very hard with the government to actually generate that demand. The president, I don't know why he hasn't announced it yet, but should be announcing a vaccine demand weekend, actually this coming weekend, where sites will be open on Saturday as well for people to vaccinate. And in key areas of the country, leaders from across business, government, and labor will encourage people to vaccinate. And we're also looking at an all-of-country commitment, including religious leaders and others, to actually get the demand going. I think it's probably one of the most critical issues in the country from an economic and human point of view. And if we can vaccinate 60 to 70% of our population by the end of the year, we have broken the back of this thing. We're not going to get there, but if we can vaccinate significant amounts of people, we have the capacity to vaccinate 200 to 250,000 people a day at least. And we need to get to that capacity by generating the demand. Then just let me talk a little bit about infrastructure, which is obviously critical to you. We've been interacting quite a bit with Infrastructure South Africa and providing capacity and so on to help them manage some of the work they do. But one of our problems is that we have a smorgasbord of infrastructure projects, and we can't crack through any of them. And what we're promoting is that what government should be agreeing on is 4 or 5 major critical growth generating infrastructure projects that they work very closely with the private sector on, that we plan these together, we plan the implementation of these together, and we involve the necessary expertise from across the private sector where it's needed to actually get 4 or 5 critical projects going. Also, as part of this, to address the blockages to rebuilding, I guess, our construction industry, things like the construction mafia and environment, appropriate labor environment to enable the construction industry to employ people easily. And those are discussions that are ongoing. Then let me just finish with some comments on broad engagement issues. I can't say that, I can't complain about access to either the president or ministers. We get access, but we're not having the hard discussions we need to have that will lead to the tough decisions that are needed to make the fundamental structural reforms in the economy. And that's because those discussions are happening at NEDLAC. And while NEDLAC is a useful forum for social dialogue, it's not a useful forum for decision making. And we are absolutely clear, and we will continue to press for this. And we've met both the new Minister of Finance and the Minister in the Presidency. And they both agree that government, and the President in particular needs to lead this, has to have detailed, hard bilaterals with business on economic recovery. And until we have that, we're not going to make progress. And we, in the process of pulling those together, so that we can get not 100 people into a room, but probably 10, 15 people from each side into a room. And let's thresh out the hard issues. Let's look at where compromises and trade-offs are necessary, because they will be necessary across the board. And let's take some decisions. And that's what we're pushing for. We're also very clear, and the major business organizations under BUSA took a decision, and I've asked for a meeting, that we also need to meet the ruling party. Because a lot of the problems in government are as a result of the problems in the ruling party. They spill over into government, and we need to indicate, not negotiate, we need to indicate to the ruling party that the way they are handling their issue is having a significant impact on the national interest, and we would expect them to actually do something about it. And then I think just finally, as I said, we've met the Minister of Finance, the Minister in the Presidency, and we think that these are both people we can work with. Already the meetings have been very positive, and we will continue to engage with them and deal with the issues. So let me stop there. Just a brief overview of what's keeping us awake at night, how we're dealing with issues, and ultimately how we move forward on this has an impact on your industry as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor. I see that there's a question or two that came in for you, but we'll put that on ice for now, and we'll get back to those questions, time permitting, at the end of our session. So I understand that we have got Mayor Bongani Baloyi. Bongani Baloyi is currently the Executive Mayor of Midvaal Local Municipality. He holds a Bachelor of Business Administration from Regenesis Business School. Baloyi is touted as one of the foremost thought leaders on ethical leadership and corporate governance. He's a civil servant with experience in business development, politics, logistics, and organizational development. He matriculated from Hoërskool Drie Rivieren in Vereniging in 2005. The same year he joined Democratic Alliance and DA Youth. Baloyi spent his latter years pursuing various business ventures while continuing to be active in the DA and DA Youth structures in the Sedibeng region. In 2011, at the age of 24, Baloyi was elected as a member of the Midvaal Local Municipal Mayoral Committee, responsible for development, planning, and housing. This made him one of the youngest MMCs in the history of South Africa. 2 years later, Baloyi became the youngest mayor in South Africa when he was elected as the Executive Mayor of Midvaal Local Municipality at the age of only 26. Baloyi has played a defining role in Midvaal's growth and success as the most financially sustainable and top-performing municipality in Gauteng, according to Ratings Africa's annual Municipal Finance Sustainability Index, as well as the Auditor General. Under his tenure, Midvaal received 4 consecutive clean audits from the Auditor General. Mr. Mayor, we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you so much. I must really apologize for my IT issues this morning, but I must really appreciate the opportunity provided to myself by CESA and the greater engineering community for the tremendous opportunity to be part of this auspicious occasion, and also just to deposit a few of my views about the experience, my experience of engineering and politics, and what it means to me, and where I see a convergence and at certain points a collaboration and cooperation as well. But there's also a strange relationship between the two, which I'll speak to, which the AG has been speaking about in various platforms. The title of my talk this morning, and I must also greet, if I continue, the fellow panelists, and I must also express my support for what I'll call him, what Kes was saying, insofar as the things that are keeping them awake at night. I can share that we are also worried about the very same issues as well. And we wish that they find success with the national government to be able to persuade them in terms of their mandate and what their program of action is. If you carefully look at the history of engineers, you would also find that they are one of the unsung and often silent heroes of advancements of civility. Your contribution in advancing quality living for mankind is next to none. We don't know the names of the engineers who designed the pyramids of Giza, the Appian Way, or even the first ark. But we do know that millions of people utilize this key infrastructure across the world over, which is ensuring that, one, they go about what they need to do in a much more productive way because of your work. and which is something that we as a society and leaders broadly should be extremely grateful for. On the face value, this noble profession seems not to be relevant with the body of politics. This profession concerns itself with the application of a very highly sophisticated, non-human machinery and a peculiar level of intellectualism. If the essence of politics is the mediation of choice, then it would seem to be far more removed, almost by definition, from engineering, since the phenomena with which engineering deals with are incapable of exercising choice or facilitating the exercise of choice. But the reality is that it is practically impossible to divorce both politics and engineering from each other. They coexist in a master-servant type of relationship. In fact, the origin of the engineering profession can be traced to a time and place in the 19th century in France, in which engineers were closely associated with government and politics. That history lives on today, and in the special role that professional engineers claim for themselves in the service of public. In fact, others argue that the first public servants were actually engineers. This French engineering legacy includes the expectation that engineers carry a special duty to public service. This has always been part of the studies or even the approaches of methodologies given to young engineers in training, and it continues today in engineering code of ethics adopted as the basis for a career as a professional engineer in the USA and also in other countries. Many engineers choose this noble profession because of a fundamental impact the profession has on the daily lives of our people. However, most do not realize that their chosen profession demands not only an obligation to public service, but also a responsibility to their community and to their local government. We cannot afford to overlook the crucial interdependence that exists between engineering and government and the society at large. Both politics and engineering are expected to operate in service of mankind. On the common ground, politicians and engineers should work together in a wholehearted cooperation. And it is in the legal and moral obligation of engineers to ensure that the safety and welfare of the public are maintained. In order to better fulfill this task, professional engineers must undertake more substantial and visible roles in their local government where they may reside. And in a democratic dispensation, which include free society, politics, and government are inseparable. Politics shapes the character of government, and the government affects all of us at a local, provincial, and national level. The engineering profession is directly affected by the course which government pursues regarding the preservation of free enterprise system, and particularly sensitive to actions of government which affect the professional climate in this country. The importance of the relationship between the engineer and politics is exemplified by the remedy being sought for creating conducive environment for our people. The professional engineer must bring to the legislative process the practical, economic, legal, and ethical viewpoint that the engineer is known to possess. And professionals and business people who neglect politics cannot lament unsound legislations later. The engineer and those who should have an interest must participate in politics in order to bring about a necessary influence to advance the cause of this profession, which is serving our people. So generally speaking, most engineers are not interested, the perception is that they're not interested in even discussing politics, much less becoming involved with them as well. To most engineers, the political arena appears to be a bureaucratic stumbling block or something they're not interested in, which is held by a maze of red tape. And this contrasts directly with the step-by-step logic that impels an engineer through his daily work. The political process has many twists, turns, and loopholes that seem too convoluted to an engineer who cannot tolerate rash or illogical thought. And political decisions are often viewed as irrational or ambiguous and are influenced by a variety of variables. And government progress is difficult to observe and measure, unlike an engineer's project, which has a defined deadline and prescribed results that can be calculated frequently. And since negative stereotypes around both the political and engineering profession, preconceived notions often hinder the meeting of the minds. And civil engineers are commonly stereotyped as having poor communication, people skills, and mostly have demonstrated a wealth of technical knowledge, but often have trouble communicating effectively with a business-minded politician or due in part of the large difference in the specialized jargon that they use. The thought of dealing with elected officials that seem larger than life often perceived as an inaccessible, frequently deters engineers from approaching politicians and the political process. But at this point, I think I want to zoom into what is quite an interesting topic that's happening within our public discourse insofar, and many of us appreciate and accept the fact that for us to grow our national economy and get even our local economy going, we need infrastructure and a conducive environment to be able to facilitate economic growth. And when you then zoom into what conducive environment is, it leads you to accessibility and reliability of infrastructure. And this infrastructure is built largely at a local and provincial level. And in this building, the process of building this infrastructure, you have political principles in both spheres of government who interface with some level of engineers. There may be internal engineers, and at most times it's also engineers appointed through a panel by the municipality, but external of the municipality. Now they play an interesting role. So for every piece of capital infrastructure put, chances are there's an engineer in the process of that somewhere, and a successful delivery of that. But in recent times, I think what has been happening, we've not really paid a closer level of attention, which is actually now in my view, putting the entire infrastructure, putting the entire sector into disrepute. And more so when you consider what the AG has been struggling with insofar as the irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure and mismanagement of billions of rands by local government in particular. And when you zoom into where the money has been spent, you'll find that close to, in fact, above 60% has actually gone into infrastructure projects. With those infrastructure projects, you find the interface of politicians and engineers. And at times, you find the interface leading to a positive output, a road built on time, on spec, within budget. And at times, you find irregular appointments, money spent, purchase orders signed off, but no delivery on the ground. And which is the part that I would want us to actually and persuade you to focus on, because what is happening in that space isn't finding enough expression, which is undermining the process. And that's where you find the direct interaction between these two, politicians and engineers, which could have, in fact, extreme effects. A very positive effect and a very negative effect. There's no middle ground in this case. And in our instances, we found in matters where there's been some challenges insofar as service delivery or allegations around corruption, when you zoom into, you find an engineer who becomes an enabler and assists the process to be corrupt by itself, with many others who are playing a role in that space. So I would really persuade CESA to look at this and find meaningful ways to deter their own members from this type of practice, but to insist upon ethical conduct as well, and finding mechanisms to speak out in the event there's pressures from politicians who may put pressure on engineers as well. And I really think that when I got the invite for this very important occasion, the first thing that sprang to my mind was this topic that one needed to put clearly and frankly on the table, to say, what are we doing with this interface between politicians and engineers, which is leading to this type of effect that's happening in our country? Because we're all invested in this country, we all love our beautiful country, but we've not done enough or adequately to be able to get to the bottom of these, and to not just speak about broad terms about 2 billion rands that's gone missing in the country as an example, but to really start focusing and going straight down to the projects and finding who was responsible and what has happened and what is the clear consequence measures, even from the sector itself, that should take these proactive steps to ensure that there are certain service providers within this very important profession which they act against and protect everything and protect the value chain as well. So I think furthermore, as I make my concluding remarks, it is the primary goal of government to serve the needs of the public. Unfortunately, the average legislature does not have the educational background or experience to always make informed decisions on complex scientific, engineering, or even technical issues. It is necessary for local government to have support from this profession in order to improve the welfare of our people everywhere. The engineering and public administration duties are so interrelated that it's impossible to separate them. It is precisely this combination and collaboration of responsibilities that makes our cities to prosper. Engineering is a tangible process wherein engineers use their skills to design, construct, and operate utilities that have a direct bearing on the public's quality of life. It is crucial that engineers are involved in government and political process. The public depends on them, and to a great extent, in fact. The success of our infrastructure requires that engineers and politicians work together in an ethical manner to the best of their abilities to serve the public. I want to conclude with a quote from Jose Abreu, who said, "I see engineering as a noble profession. We were the first civil servants, probably going back to Roman times. We were civil servants first and engineers second. I'm just a public servant doing the best I can for the people I serve," close quote. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Maya, thank you. And with that thought in mind, I'm sure you wouldn't mind if I call you Bongani and you can call me Andre. We can get the conversation going in future.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the address. I'm going to ask Cass to join us and Sugen as well. Then we can take a couple of questions. I see that there's some questions. Cass, I'm going to start with you. The first question we had on the list is, why did the DDIC minister concede the exemptions for designated local content on the RMI PPP program? I'm not sure whether you've had any involvement with that, but it's been in the news and we know about the events around it. Do you have any comments on that?
Not on that specifically, and I'm also looking at the next question from Nicholas.
That's welcome. You can jump straight
in the localization discussions with the minister. So the minister's sort of, the way this minister works is that she thinks that if you set a target, everything happens. And we've been engaged with him to say it doesn't work that way. So the bottom line is that we have done a number of things, or this government has done a number of things historically that actually do not facilitate localization, do not facilitate the growth of local businesses, where we have the competitive advantages to actually manufacture things on our own. And though that sort of a mindset and those sorts of regulations need to be revisited as part of the initiative to actually increase localization, increase local manufacturing. So what we've done at BUSA is that we put together a localization working group, and we've just actually finalized interviews, and we'll be offering a position to somebody to project manage this. And this person will be working with the 30-odd CEOs that we've identified as champions from across product categories. And we will be putting on the table to government what needs to be done in the regulatory space, what are the low-hanging fruits, what we need to do more work on, and what are pragmatic commitments that we can make in the next 5 years in particular areas to actually get local manufacturing and check it up. So these are all part of those discussions, and we will definitely address these as those discussions unfold. Thanks.
Okay, so I think that also addresses Nicholas's follow-up question around the red tape in the IPP. So it's encouraging to hear BUSA taking a leading role in the IPP program. That's such a critical component of getting us our economy back going again. Then we had a question from Mosa, just in terms of the 4 or 5 key infrastructure projects. If you can give us a bit of a sense of what you would see those types of projects, what they would look like.
Well, look, we've just put to the new Minister of Finance and the Minister in the Presidency in the last 3 weeks that this is the route we should be going. We haven't put to them what we think those infrastructure projects should be. I think these are infrastructure project that government and business needs to sit down and identify together. We have planned with the Minister of Finance at his suggestion. We're looking for a date in diaries to have a half-day session with him, and we'll obviously involve Busa board in that, to have a half-day session with him to unpack some of these issues and to begin to talk about, if we're talking infrastructure, we're talking 4 or 5 projects, what they're thinking on that, what's our thinking on that, and let's try to find each other.
Am I right in speculating that projects like that should be economic infrastructure projects,
Yeah.
not necessarily social infrastructure?
Yeah,
So
that's why I said that these have got to be major economic generation projects.
yes,
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you. Then we had a question for Mr. Meyer. Let me just see. It had to do with engineers and politicians. The question, oh, there we go. So if we can, Bongani, if you can help us with this one. The question was that, how has your experience as an, so as an engineer influenced your role as a mayor? So in the intro, you did say that you've got a business administration qualification. I didn't see engineering qualification, and maybe Devin, from your talk, assumed you've got an engineering background, because you so eloquently put forward the case for engineers to be involved in politics. But maybe in general, you can just give us a sense of how the Midvaal municipality is shaped by engineering, and the role of engineers. What was your experience on that?
Thank you so much. I think for my sins, I've spent quite a lot of time with engineers in the municipality. So to be able to understand their cause and speak the way I do, but I'm not an engineer. It's a profession which is way above my limited intellectual capacity. But I think my experience with the engineering department has taught me quite a few things. Most of the approach that we need to use when we are planning for the future of the municipality. Because as you are shaping the spatial configuration, you must also settle people somewhere. You must also be able to provide people adequate water, electricity, and sanitation services. So that requires a level of planning and budget allocation, and to plan over the multiple financial years, what you do, when you do, and by what stage. And I often take the flack of directing close to about 60% of our CAPEX budget on the bulk infrastructure. And many a times people don't see this, and they just assume when you open your tap, the water runs. There's no end-to-end connection somewhere that's delivering successfully, reliably, and continuously. And when you flush your toilet, it doesn't come out of your kitchen. There's a lot of things that happen below ground that we don't see, and we don't invest sufficiently in those. We can't be able to say to people like Busa, come and invest, or persuade your members to come and invest in Midvaal, because we can guarantee you reliable water, electricity, and there's political stability. So what able from in Midvaal and stable politics to listen to professionals who we have appointed to advise us. And there's often a fight about the nature of the reports various professionals provide to us to try and persuade us in one way or another. Finding a balance is the most difficult way. But our approach is such that we accept and appreciate that we need to invest in economic infrastructure, in social infrastructure, but equally within the economic infrastructure must also invest in redress, where our people don't have adequate level of services or access to those. We must do so as well. But it does not make sense to take more than 40 or 30% of the budget there, because it doesn't yield to any growth, which unlocks opportunities and unlocks a bigger revenue base for the municipality. So, and we've held firm, and where we've been criticized, but this has led to the type of investment over the years and the success that we've enjoyed as a municipality. And really the biggest part and key takeaway for me is that engineers in the municipality, in as much over my 10-year period, we've had a few of them who have come and gone, but I can guarantee you they know that the advice they give to the mayor and the executive is of paramount importance, because without any engineering infrastructure growth plan, then you're just speculating. It's almost a God help us approach. We will see where we go. And private sector comes and pulls you one direction and pulls you another direction. And you can't retain your character of your city and remain in resilient, compact, and livable space because you're not controlling carefully and investing carefully to be able to direct that investment. So I think the work that we've been doing now, it will start to materialize and lead growth over the next 10 to 15 years. So Midval is exactly 10 to 15 years where Midrand was. And I think in 10 to 15 years' time, you'll start to see the positive impact of the work and the foundation we are laying today to unlock that growth and invest and draw investment down to the south of Johannesburg.
Thank you for that. I need 5 minutes to wrap the session up, so I'm going to throw one last question at Sugeng. Sugeng, you spoke about rebuilding with purpose. Perhaps you can just, in a brief sentence or two, give us your view on what the purpose is of a consulting engineer in South Africa.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a little more than a minute or two. But firstly, just to congratulate the mayor there at Midval, Mr. Boloy, on speaking so eloquently about what needs to be done to make our cities more livable, sustainable, and really, it's so refreshing to hear the value that they place on the technical input that they are receiving from the engineers, whether it's in-house or external. So, just congratulations there to the mayor. I tried to point this out very quickly in my opening remarks, but the face of engineering has changed completely, and for us as engineers, we need to become more comfortable in this new role that we had. That we have. Firstly, I think that just prior to this last period, we had very little interaction or opportunity to interact with decision makers, with government, whether it was at national, local, provincial level. And fortunately, that has changed completely now. And thanks a lot to the work that the likes of BUSA have been doing, where we do have those opportunities to discuss and to collaborate. But also, as Mr. Kovadia has said, we need to move to decision making now. And for us as engineers, as I tried to point out as well, we need to reimagine our role. How do we become part of that process of the decision making as the technical experts in the country? How do we contribute to those discussions and assist government, business, and society to make the best decisions when it comes to matters of a technical nature? I've said this so many times before, that engineering is not about providing infrastructure. It's about enabling society and business to function and to prosper effectively and efficiently. And also, as I said, we need to refashion our projects, whatever we're doing now, whether it's social infrastructure, economic infrastructure. But us as the technical experts, we need to refashion our solutions that we bring to the table so that they can make a difference, they can address poverty, unemployment, inequality, and underdevelopment. So really my plea to our consulting engineers in general is to reimagine our roles that we're playing in this discussion. We need to make our voices heard, and we need to also reclaim our role as the technical experts so that we can positively influence the decisions that we're making. Thanks, Andrew.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sugeng. So, gents, if I just summarize, Sugeng kicked us off by stating that we're rebuilding with purpose, the topic for the session. And that means that we need to build a new economy effectively, and that's a massive exercise. He also mentioned that democracy is fragile and precious, and that we're not only building infrastructure, but we're addressing poverty, unemployment, and social injustice. So as engineers, we need to involve communities, and he supports the slogan, saving lives and livelihoods. So the focus on global goals for sustainable development was also brought into the theme. And so again, thank you again for your welcoming address and your presentation. Then Cass took us through a bit of what BUSA is undertaking, also focusing on economic recovery discussions via NETLAC and the Economic Recovery Action Plan that has elements in it like spectrum and the mining licenses and renewables and the Durban port, etc. But we emphasize that we need urgency and leadership. That's critical at a political level. He touched on localization that supported by BLSA and BUSA. And there's a capacity increase in localization in 30 areas that's focused on. And he mentioned an example of PPP being manufactured locally. Company boards, in terms of labor representation, he said the timing is not right, and I tend to agree with him on that one. And then he moved on to some highlights on the National Health Program, and I again support the public and private sector that need to participate and cooperate on that. And BUSA is busy with a submission to Parliament with a proposal. Climate change comments. Eskom is moving forward. That's always good to hear in terms of sustainability. And we need some funding and capacity support from the development goals if we're going to make this work. He touched on the vaccine rollout, and I'm delighted to hear the supply problems are behind us. And we're now focusing on the demand side and can roll out between 200 and 250,000 vaccines a day. That's wonderful. Then he concluded in terms of infrastructure SA support, and he mentioned the 4 or 5 major projects, critical growth projects that we need to rebuild the construction industry, and I think that is vital for us to move forward. We then had Maya Bongani take us through quite an interesting discussion around engineers, and that the engineering sector is the unsung heroes of that's working in the background, but engineers are not interested in politics. And then later on, he said that politicians aren't interested in engineering. So we see that there's a bridge that needs to be built there. He mentioned the master-servant relationship. That's a very interesting concept between engineering and politics. And I'm sure we'll think about that one a bit more. And then importantly, he highlighted that engineers have a duty to the public service, and it has an impact on people. And we need to participate and engage as much as we practically can. He also highlighted that we have a practical responsibilities to be involved with politics. The rational versus the irrational, the tangible versus the intangible was highlighted, and that's very interesting. Communication skills of engineers has never been great. I think a lot of us can attest to. But it is a skill that we can develop, similar to the politicians developing skills of understanding engineering better, and we meet each other in the middle. And then infrastructure access is needed. We agree with that. The 60% of the money spent on infrastructure is very important, and we need to up the focus on challenging service delivery and corruption. So he challenged CESA to find a meaningful way to speak out against corruption, and the CESA corruption fund that we set up a number of years ago was one of those initiatives. But I agree, we need to become more vocal, and that has a link to how we as the engineering sector become more politically minded. That interface and proactive action to protect the value chain was quite important. And he closed off by saying that we have got a bearing on the public quality of life, and I think we all agree with that. So, gentlemen, this brings our session to a close. I would like to express my appreciation to our two keynote speakers for their valued contribution. As I close the session, and Chris, I hand back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andre, for facilitating that session. And once again, thanks to our speakers. I think you provided an exceptional summary of the various presentations. I couldn't but help, at least for myself, have at least two key takeaways from the session before we take a short break, and that being that engineers, the consulting engineering industry, built environment professionals, and business organizations and businesses through BUSA, for example, it's important that we are at the table. The narrative has to change from us being on the menu. We've got to be at the table, because it is indeed through business that the differences that we hope to see in our country will be made possible. I think for too long, and it's interesting that we've got local government elections coming along, as business and civil society, if we don't take ownership of what we would like to see the future be, then it's not necessarily going to happen on its own. And very crucially, we've got to get involved if we are going to change the trajectory that our country currently is on. That's a key takeaway. And then the second key takeaway was, from the executive mayor, I think how the first part of what I've just mentioned is going to work is exactly what the executive mayor, Mr. Bongani Baloyi and Bongani, I think that it's excellent that Bongani is comfortable enough to be referred to as Bongani. Those days when the minister walks in the room and everybody stands and clap hands. Sorry, we need to really be clapping hands because people have done something, not because they are that. So thank you, Bongani. The key takeaway there is between business, civil society, and government has to be trust, and more trust. I think for us to dwell on 2010, we've got to get over that. That happened. We've got to learn from it. We've had 9 years of disaster that was reflected on by our current president, Ramaphosa. And we now have to fix that. We likewise, there's much more we'd like to see in terms of leadership, and that was reflected on. And then just so that there's a better understanding of what engineers bring to the table, because I don't think the conversation is of necessity about engineers don't like politics. Certainly, what engineers are trained to do is to help solve problems. That is actually endemic in people who've gone through that process and that process of study. And if the problem is one of getting politicians to meet each other and talk things through and provide some perspective, then certainly that's a key role that engineers can play. We certainly do not revel in the thought of talking and blowing hot air without seeing anything concrete being delivered. I'm quite happy as an engineer myself to remain an unsung hero. I've worked on many projects. Guess what? The stormwater pipes are under the ground. There's no flooding there, provided you maintain it. And so many of us will remain those because it's what we do. And so with that, colleagues, I'm now going to invite you to take a short break. We will resume again at 12 and commence our second panel discussion of the day. Please feel free to visit our sponsors and exhibitors who will be in their virtual booths for the duration of the break. And we will return to the tables shortly and highly recommend that you join many of our sponsors to learn more about their offerings. You can also table hop by double-clicking on an open seat at any other table. So feel free to network with your colleagues and industry peers, albeit in a virtual platform such as this. See you at 12. You may remain logged on and just please explore the program as we take this short break. Thank you.